Good morning. Let's go ahead and talk about chi-squared. I'm in 10.6. So we're going to talk about one where we have equal proportions. So a telephone company claims the service calls which are received are equally distributed among 5 working days of the week. A survey of 100 randomly selected service calls was conducted. Is the company's claim refuted by data at 0.01 level? So what we see here is we have categories, which are days of the week, and we have the number of calls they received. So the company believes that they are equally distributed in five days. So my null hypothesis is service calls are equally distributed over the 5 working days. For these kind of problems, that's the only kind of null hypothesis you can have, is that they're equal. The alternative is that they're not equal. So when you're looking for the correct option for the hypothesis, it's A. All of the categories are hypothesized to have equal probabilities. We'll look at one in the next video where they have different ones. Below, we'll see it wants to know what the hypothesis could be. Well, you can say all the proportions equal 1 over 5 because that's 1 day over all 5 days, or 0.20 if you divide 1 by 5. And the alternative, you're going to put in the exact same value. And that's at least one of the proportions is not equal to 1 over 5 or 0.20. So to get my expected number of observations, I went ahead and made a table below to make it easier for us to look at. I have the days of the week, the observed values, which I got from above, and the expected. So to get the expected, I have to use the sample size of 100, which is all the observed added together, times 0.20, which I got, or 1 over 5, and it equals 20. So because all the proportions are the same, these are all going to be 20. All right, the next step, well, so then I can just put 20 for Monday and 20 for Wednesday, because they're all going to be 20. The next step wants me to find the test statistic. And what I do then is if you have the calculator, you can put in your observed and expected into your list set and it'll run it for you. But some of you don't, so I'm going to show you how to do it by hand. So the first thing I'm going to do is as you can see up here, I did Monday, which is 16 minus 20, which is the expected. I squared it, and then I divided by 20 to get 0.8. I recommend you do it in this format where you use all the parentheses I did to get the correct number. The TI calculators are very particular about the way that you put stuff in. So let's look at Tuesday. It's 23 minus 20. Square it over 20 gives me 0.45. And I did this for Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday too. If I add all these chi-squared values up, I get 2.900. And this is the test statistics and the calculations I did. So the next thing it wants me to do is find the degrees of freedom. The degrees of freedom is the number of categories minus 1. So the number of categories we have is there's 5 days of the week, which is each a category, and a minus 1, and I get 4. All right, so now we have to find the critical value. This is in table G in your book or online. So if I go look in table G, I see that I'm at remember, what was my level of significance? 0.01. I go over to that, and then I go down to number 4. And I find that my value is 13.277. So that's my critical value of the test statistic. All right, to conclude this, it wants me to conclude if I'm going to fail to reject or reject the null. So I'm going to compare the chi-squared value that I calculated from above, if that is greater than or equal to the chi-squared critical value from the table. If that is a true statement, you reject your null. So I look at, is 2.90 greater than or equal to 13.277? Because remember, the 277 comes from adding all of these numbers up right here. And the 13.277 came from the table. And I kind of put it here, you calculated versus from the table. So since 2.9 is not greater than 13.277, you fail to reject your null. So what does that mean? Well, I brought down the correct hypothesis down here. It means that the service calls are equally distributed over the 5 working days. So that's a correct statement. So, which am I going to choose to correspond? There was not significant evidence to refute the claim. So that means we're keeping the claim. That's all that means. All right. So that is a chi-squared of equal proportions. In the next video, I'm going to do one where they're different.